for another episode of Popcorn and Parachute Pants, a podcast where we discuss the very best of movies of the 1980s. And now, here are your hosts, Mr. Fingers and Nick Rosario.
Well, good evening.
Oh,
Wait a minute. I was supposed to let you start, right?
That's okay. I didn't know it. That's why I was like, oh, crap. Anthony speaking. My bad.
It's all good. All right. All right. Reset. Because I'm
sorry. Reset.
Reset. Okay.
All right.
And
Reset.
3,
Okay.
2, and 1. Go.
Hey, welcome, everyone. We're back. I know you missed us, but we're back. It is I, Nick Rosario, here, of course, with Mr. Anthony Handy on the Popcorn and Parachutes, an 80s movie podcast. And Handy, how are you doing, man? We're back. It's been a little while. How we doing? Are you ready for this? We're back, buddy. We're back.
It's been a long while. As the great God MC Rakim said, it's been a long time. I shouldn't have left you. And then, of course, was famously sampled by Timbaland later on in the decade. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. Look, man, we're overdue. We've been waiting on this for a long time. Football season's over. We're kind of in that weird space where we're right before the draft and the combine, and baseball hasn't started yet. So we decided we were going to get it here and get it moving. And I'm glad. I don't want to use my slogan from the football show, but I can't help it. I'm very happy to be here. So
there it is.
I am, brother.
Hey, fabulous.
Fabulous. And today, ladies and gentlemen, we are coming back strong. Right where we left off. We actually had this one in the can. This was going to be our season ender, but we never got around to recording it. So welcome to episode 6. And today, my good friend Nick and I are going to be talking about, we thought it would be appropriate with the upcoming baseball season to dig out a classic out of the crates. Which classic? I'm glad you asked. None other than the one and only Bull Durham. That's right. Bull Durham. You all know it. 1988 movie, romantic sports comedy film. Baseball being the sport. It was directed by Ron Shelton. It was all based on a real team called the Durham Bulls. It's a minor league team which was out of Durham, North Carolina. And there's love, there's sex, there's baseball, and more baseball metaphors than you can shake a stick at. And how could you miss? This had a can't miss cast here. Okay, let's run through these. I'm just gonna jump in here and start rattling off some names for you. You know this guy. He's been around everywhere. Kevin Costner. Y'all know him now from The Bodyguard and Yellowstone and things like that. But Kevin Costner, and we'll get into what part he plays in just a bit. And we had the always welcome, always lovely, always talented, always nails just about every role she's in. Who am I kidding? She nails every role she's in. Susan Sarandon. And then to round out the trilogy, we got this guy right here, the great Tim Robbins. And so this is where I handed it back off to Nick and kind of let him give us a brief synopsis of what the movie's about.
Right. So Bull Durham is basically a look at minor league baseball at its essence. That's the very simple definition. But of course, the story goes that Tim Robbins is a prospect with what they call $1 million arm. The kid can throw a fastball like nobody's business, but he's got a 5-cent head, as Kevin Costner says to him. $1 million arm, 5-cent head. So what ends up happening is that Nuke Lelouch, which is the name, Calvin Lelouch is his name, Nuke becomes his nickname. On this first night of him making his pro debut throwing, we find Nuke Lelouch in the beginning of the film getting a little warm-up from one of the ladies, from one of the girls who hangs around the stadium. It's actually her father donated the scoreboard. They'll tell you that at the beginning of the movie. You see the line is so great where she's like, well, my daddy donated that scoreboard, and if you kick me out of the locker room, he might just take it back. And the coach greatly says, well, what do we need a scoreboard for? We ain't scored any runs. So totally great. But again, the story, that is Trey Wilson, who plays the Skip. His nickname is Skip in the movie. I don't think they ever call him by anything else. But Trey Wilson, Skip, which is famously delivers that line, which I've always cracked up at and thought it was funny. But yeah, so like I said, Nuke is making his professional debut. It's one of those things where it's like a 50-50 thing. He strikes out 18 batters. He walks 18 batters. He hits the mascot. He throws at the PA announcers because the ball just goes wild. And so you see in the beginning, Kevin Costner walks in after this game has ended. And he's trying to figure, he goes into the coach's office because he's like, hey, I'm the player to be named later. And the coach and the pitching coach there was played by Robert Wuhl. His character name is Larry in the movie, just pitching coach Larry. And they just get into it. He's like, hey, why am I here? What am I doing here? Like, blah, blah, blah. And they explain to him, we've got this new love arm. The big club's got a bunch of money invested in him. We want you to, we want you to tutor him as where he's like, no, that's not what you, as a matter of fact, his line is, you want a stable pony. And the line that he delivers that cracks me up every time is, my AAA contract gets bought out so I can hold the flavor of the month's dick in the bus leagues. And then he proceeds to quit and walk out of the office. And for about 2-3 seconds, you see him standing there and he's like, what time is batting practice tomorrow? And it goes from there. So then, real quickly, we'll get through this. Now Susan Sarandon gets introduced, and this completes the trio that starts this movie off. They go out for a drink afterwards. They end up at the same bar. Kevin Costner is at the bar. Susan Sarandon's at the bar with a guy named Max Patkin, who's the clown prince of baseball, who was like the little sideshow they have there. But Max was actually a real guy, and he did that in real life. If you didn't know that, Max Patkin was an actual guy who went around to minor league stadiums and entertained and did all that. And it just shows, Tim Robbins crazily dancing with everybody on the dance floor. So it's this whole thing. And Max calls Crash over to sit down with Annie. Annie Savoy is the character Susan Sarandon plays. They sit down together and they start talking, blah, blah. And then Tim Robbins comes over and starts kind of putting the moves on Susan Sarandon, as it were. Kevin Costner interjects just because he's more messing with this kid because he knows that he's got to spend the rest of the time that he has trying to teach this kid lessons and that sort of thing. So from the beginning, he just is just giving him tough love throughout the whole thing. And the best part at this whole thing, the way the scene goes, for those of you who have seen the movie, and if you have not, I really recommend you watching this movie. But at one point, Tim Robbins, being the young hothead that he is, asks Kevin Costner to step outside to settle this. So they go out to the back of where the bar is, and they start jawing at each other. And, Kevin Costner's like, go ahead, take a swing at me. And he's like, no, I don't hit anybody first. And he's like, well, from what I hear, you couldn't hit water if you fell out of a boat. Another great line in the film. So, long story short, Kevin Costner says, here, hit me in the chest with this, pulls a baseball out of his jacket, gives it to him and says, here, hit me in the chest with this. He's like, no, man, I'd kill you. And he's like, no, you're going to miss. Come on, hit me. You're thinking about it. You're not going to do it. Sure enough, true to form, he throws the ball, breaks the window, doesn't hit Kevin Costner at all. Kevin Costner smart asses him and goes, ball 4. And Nuke gets mad and goes over to punch him. And before he can throw his punch, Kevin Costner hits him in the jaw and he falls down. And he says, I'm Crash Davis, I'm your new catcher, and you just got your first lesson. Don't think it can only hurt the ball club. And from there, the movie gets off and running. So that's kind of a quick thing of how that goes. And so, that first kind of act in the movie is a lot of that. It's Kevin Costner trying to teach him things, but also, and I think, Handy, you might want to get into a little bit of this. This is where Susan Sarandon comes in to play in the movie because she's now, her thing is that she likes to sleep with one player per season, and she goes through a process of picking which player that is, which leads to the two prospects are, of course, Nuke LaLoosh and Crash Davis. So,
yeah. Yeah. And, here's funny. When I saw this movie for the first time, and one part that you didn't mention, Crash immediately starts calling this kid meat.
Yeah,
call him meat. Now, my then not quite 18-year-old brain. I turned 18 a week after this movie came out. Like 8 days after the movie came out. My 17-year-old brain was like, gosh, this guy must be, he must be blessed or something. Nah, it was just a play on words, when Archie Bunker used to call his son-in-law meathead.
Yeah.
So that's essentially where that came from. He just called him, why does he keep calling me meat? You know,
Yeah.
and he played that role. So why does he keep calling me meat? You know, he sounds like the stereotypical jock. I mean, I've seen Tim Robbins in a bunch of movies, and he plays this role to the T. The bewildered, totally can't buy a clue with all the money in the world, all the talent in the world, no brains jock
Yeah.
that just had the world handed to him on a silver platter. And love that about him. And Kevin Costner is gonna Kevin Costner. Kevin, if you think about it, Kevin Costner is the same guy in every movie, just with a different job.
He said just for a different job, huh?
Just with a different job. Wasn't he in a Robin Hood movie at one point? Did he do a Robin Hood movie?
Well, that was a little later. That was like 91 or 90. Yeah, 91,
but
I believe.
I'm just saying
Yeah,
he was Kevin Costner in that movie. He was Kevin Costner he was the same character in The Bodyguard. He was the same character in Robin Hood. He's the same character in Yellowstone, just older with a more gravelly voice.
Yeah, exactly right.
So he's the same guy in every movie, and he's found his niche, and it works for him. And then the thing with Annie is like she kind of takes them on as a lover, and she's this. How do I say this? She's kind of one of those women that's like a free spirit, and it's very into all of these different types of spirituality. Like she's one of those people that could tell you that she was a Christian for 2 years, and then she practiced Buddhism and went to Tibet,
Right.
and then she went to India and she practiced Hindu, and then she was a Rastafarian, and that was a bad time. Smoked too much weed, ate too much food, that kind of thing. Like she's just that type of person, and she's got zero filter. And she's also kind of strikes me as the groupie that didn't realize when to stop being the groupie. Like that's kind of a thing that more younger women do. You know what I mean? And she still lives in town and holds her little spot. And she's all into these philosophies and poetry. And she's very well read. But yeah, she decides to bring two guys home, and she's like, all right, which one of you boys is up to the task? And that's where things really get interesting, where you have Kevin Costner asking where she asked Crash, Kevin Costner's character, what he believes in, and he totally breaks this thing down for her, which is actually, you know what, we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves here because I'm almost racing to another point in the but, the three of them just blended so well together. It's almost, going back and reading about the auditions and who they wanted for the parts and things like that. It's hard for me to believe that they didn't just pick up the phone and go, I need Tim, I need Kevin, I need Susan. Boom, hang up the phone. But the chemistry between them, the three of them, it comes across as genuine on screen. It's not, you can't really, it's hard to say that they're acting because they blended. So it's almost like they knew when to drop off each other's sentences and pick back up with each one another. And the sexual chemistry between all of them, where you got Meat / Nuke, who's over here in the corner. He's like, yeah, okay, I'm getting me a little something tonight. And Kevin Costner's like, I can work with that, but I got to figure out how to eliminate that dummy first.
Right. Exactly. No, exactly right.
But I think it's actually great. It's actually a great thing. And I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves because we said we were going to do fun facts later. But here is a fun fact that I wanted to get out there. And if I got one of yours, I apologize in advance. But we steal each other's stuff all the time on these shows.
Right. This happens.
So during the filming of this movie, Tim Robbins and Susan Sarandon started a relationship, a real life relationship that lasted, was it 20 some odd years? I think they were together as partners from the time the movie was released up, and it wasn't that long ago. Just 2009 was when they split up. So love was definitely in the air, and this isn't the first time, we've heard about Brad and Angelina.
Castmates get together, right? Yeah,
Brad and Angelina on Mr. and Mrs. Smith while Brad was still with some lady with
Jennifer.
some hair that everybody wanted the same hairstyle. And she used to be on some show by some people who used to hang out in some coffee shop in New York City. I forget her name, but I joke. She was with Jennifer Aniston. So this is not the first time. But the thing that gets me most about this movie is how Kevin Costner is able, I keep calling them by their actor names, how Crash is able to draw the best out of Nuke. And there's some pretty unconventional methods between him and Annie working together to get them to draw some things out of Nuke. And I'm going to hand it back to you. I'm going to let you talk about if we're on the same wavelength. I think you know where I'm going with one of the unconventional methods that Annie laid on Nuke there.
Absolutely. So, as you know, like Anthony said, there is this big meeting where Anthony takes both of them home and decides she likes to fill them out and see what.
I ain't take nobody home. Who took what?
What? Yeah. I said Andy, not Handy. Did I say Handy? I didn't think I did.
I thought you said Anthony for a minute. My bad.
No.
Let me fall back.
Sorry. Right. That's okay. That's okay. Right. Let me. Annie, the character played by Susan Sarandon in the movie. So she takes these two guys home, right? So long story short, and we'll get to a little bit more of that scene later, but no surprise here. If you've seen the movie, she picks Nuke because Kevin Costner kind of tells her, well, this, and that, I'm out of here, blah, blah, blah. So she ends up with Nuke. And the stuff that she kind of puts, like the first night he thinks that he's going to get lucky. And what happens is she ties him up. So he's thinking this is going to go well, blah, 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 blah. And all she does is read poetry to him all night while he's tied up. So he comes back. This is why this is hilarious too. He comes in the next day and he's like, oh, and I was with Andy last night, and the pitching coach gets guys like, oh, that's great, you were with Andy, blah, 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 this and that. He's like, oh man, we didn't do anything. She just read poetry to me all night. But one of the things she also did for him was to kind of center him, as it were, was she told him that he should wear ladies' garters so that he feels kind of, sexy on the mound, and he kind of, blah, 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 blah. He channels whatever energy he has sexually to his pitching. So he puts on this garter belt, or he wears this garter belt underneath his, uniform because Andy told him to. And there's a couple of scenes in the movie where you see him, he's like pulling on him and he's like tugging on him, like, oh, what do I need to do with this thing? And it's just funny because, like Andy said, he doesn't even realize that she's manipulating him in that way. Like, he just thinks this is a sexy thing, like I'm wearing her underwear, blah, 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 blah. But, she's playing with him like this. She does this every year. She picks one guy and has a fun summer with whoever the player she picks is. So him, being that, and that's the other reason I think that's really funny that Kevin Costner calls him Meat. Because he even tells him at one point, on another thing, Meat, the only reason Andy wants you is because she can boss you around, which is true, though, because if you look at how the movie goes and how it progresses, a lot of that stuff is Andy playing with his mind and trying, different things. So, again, getting back to more of the kind of where we are in the movie, we're only about maybe 20, 25 minutes in at this point with the meeting of them, and then all of a sudden the season starts. And, the Bulls weren't that good before Nuke and Crash got there. And all of a sudden, the team actually starts to play well. And now this is where the dynamic comes in, where now Crash decides that he actually would like Annie. But Annie has told him that she's committed to only one person for the season, and that's Nuke. So now you have the dynamic of these two playing their chess game, and Nuke still just, doing his thing with Andy because he thinks this is the greatest thing in the world, that, he's he's getting paid to play baseball and he's having sex on a regular basis with a hot older woman. I mean, what guy wouldn't want that fantasy, huh, Andy? I'm just saying.
I could see that at 20-something. I mean, dude, I was 7. Like I said, I was 17 when this movie came out, and I was like, ooh. You know what
exactly. I mean? No, 100%. That's what I'm saying. See, that's the thing too. Like, you probably, I'm sure there were other actresses who were up for this part, like, because they always see a bunch of people for these movies. Mm-hmm. But I think at that particular moment in time, there was probably nobody who could have done this better than Susan Sarandon with just the way she played it, because she had just the right amount of like that that sexy, like older woman, even though she probably, I mean, in all actuality, she wasn't a ton older than Robbins. She's older than both Kevin Costner and Tim Robbins. Because I don't know if people actually knew this. In real life, Costner's only 3 years older than Tim Robbins. But in the movie, he plays like he's at least 10 to 12 years older than him. You know, he's the grizzled veteran, and Tim Robbins is, you know, Nuke LaLoosh is the rookie. But yeah, so I mean, she plays that really well with that. You know, it's almost the Mrs. Robinson type thing, seducing the younger guy.
100%
You know, type
sister's
deal.
mom all day.
Yeah, right, exactly, and that's the kind of thing. But the way she played, like you said, she plays Annie as you, because you think she's crazy for the stuff she does. You know, she's got the crazy Spanish singer that he said. You know, she's always got playing in the background. You know, she's got rosary, but she studied this other stuff. Like, she tries to get in the guy's head first, which is why, you know, he thinks he's having sex the first night, and instead she just reads poetry to him because she wants to try to educate him as well and give him a little something, you know. So it's just the whole thing plays really well, as Anthony mentioned. Like, the chemistry in this movie is amazing between the three of them, and like I said, it really, I don't know that you could have gotten three other people. I mean, you could have, but I don't know the movie would have been the same, especially because of the writing. I think that's an important factor of this too that we should mention, is that Ron Shelton, who wrote the movie and directed it, um, you know, actually he based it off of his experience playing minor league baseball. And I think that's why this movie, of all baseball movies that have been made, to me is one of the more authentic ones, because it comes from an actual place of experience and what he went through while trying to be
Right.
a baseball player. And I
Right.
think that really shows in this movie, because even with the supporting cast, the other guys on the team, you know, there's one scene that they do where a guy gets cut because he's just not hitting the ball well. And you see the coach go in, and, you know, the coach sits down, he's like, hey, this is the toughest job a manager has. You know, the organization's decided to make a change. We're letting you go. And the guy's like, well, come on, Skip. You know I haven't been hitting well lately, but all I need is, you know, one or two to get back in the groove. And he's like, I'm really sorry. You know, we're letting you go. And those are things that actually happen, you know, and
Yeah, all
those
the
are the
time.
kinds of things. Yeah. You know, so just for like I said, just the way the movie was written, the way that things are portrayed. And again, it's a movie, so it's made up fine, but it really gives you a great look kind of into minor league baseball. And if you're a baseball fan and you haven't seen this movie, I challenge you to go out and find it right away, because
Yes.
that's one of the things I truly like about this film. That's why it is, for me, my favorite baseball film, because you can just feel the authenticity coming from it, and just the way it's played and the way that it's laid out. It really does come through as one of those things. So again, Handy, I'm going to throw it back to you. We're kind of like, I don't know, we're, you know, into the middle of the movie here, and you know, let's progress the story a little bit, as it were. Go ahead,
Yeah.
sir.
So as things tend to do in these types of movies, so things pick up for Meat slash Nuke, and he gets called up to the majors, and that was a big sticking point for Crash, because Crash had what he called it, the best 21 days of his life or something like that while he was in the major leagues.
He was in the
It was,
show. He's like, I had
it
21
was
days in the show once. Yes.
21 days in the show. And that's a thing that everybody, to a person, everybody that has ever played in the minor leagues, that's all they ever want to do is get the call up to go play in the big show, to go play in the big stadiums, to play at Camden Yards and Truist Bank Stadium and Candlestick Park. I don't even think Candlestick still exists anymore. But
It does not, but I
yeah,
got you.
you know, that goes to show you how long I follow baseball out on the West Coast. Anyway,
Right, exactly.
just to play at Yankee State. I mean, could you imagine being
Yeah.
20 some odd years old and just going and stepping out on the field at Yankee Stadium
Yeah, for
as
real.
a baseball, as a young 20-something-year-old baseball player, or Fenway Park or Wrigley Field? You know what I mean? Or
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure.
back in my day, Atlanta Fulton County Stadium,
Sure, Fulton County
which was,
Stadium, baby.
from back in the day when the stadiums used to be dual purpose. They played, baseball
Football
and
and baseball.
football overlapped
Yeah.
in September, because baseball runs to October. Just Yeah, that's all they ever talked about. So of course, ostensibly, there's some feelings of resentment and jealousy. Proud of the kid for getting where he's going, but some feelings of jealousy on Crash's part, and he's feeling kind of some kind of way about it. But then he realizes, hey, kid's gone, and so is my competition.
Well, yeah.
And so, of course, as Kevin Costner doing what Kevin Costner does in every
Right.
Kevin Costner movie, he winds up with the pretty lady in the movie, and it actually does him some good too. But he winds up getting cut from the team because his primary purpose for being there was to train up Nuke to
Yeah.
get to the big leagues.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, you know what? 77, get out of Dodge. 77, bro. Susan Sarandon is
Currently,
77 years old.
yes. Currently, she's right. She's yeah, and that's the thing. Like, if you backtrack to that, 80. They made the movie probably 87, right? So
88.
that's
88,
well, I mean,
which
that's
is
when it came out. So they probably
36
filmed in
years ago.
87, right? So the movie comes out 36 years ago. So about 37 years ago, they filmed. So she was 40 years old when they did the movie. And
Yeah.
that's why I'm saying, like, that, you just go, man, if I had a 40-year-old who looked like that in my neighborhood, I might do this, I might decide to go chase, I'm just saying, like, that's one of those things where when you're a young man and you see that, you're like, this is incredible. But yeah, you know, and that's that's where the dynamic comes into play, because like you said, the team started to have success, and so then eventually Nuke gets the call up to go to the major leagues, because that's what happens. That's why he was sent down there, to get some seasoning, and that's why, like you said, Kevin Costner was brought in to get the kid along and to get him to where he needs to be, which in a way that's the same. It's funny because they both have the same motivation, Annie and Crash, and Annie talks about this during the film, is that she helps these boys to grow so that when they get to the majors, they have they're more well-rounded. And I think that's why I think the character, and think about this, Andy, there's like, just to get a little bit into the kind of the where the time was in 88. I don't think people give enough credit to Ron Shelton for writing a strong woman character like this,
No, they don't.
who really does, you know what I'm saying? Like, back then you didn't see a lot of those kinds of parts for women that were that kind of, I mean, she really sinks her teeth into this, and she really puts on a great performance, because again, when you think about it, Annie controls a lot of the stuff here with
Yeah,
everything. I mean,
all
she
the
gets
strength.
crashed. Yeah, like, she pulls everything in this movie, and truly does. She even manipulates Costner. Like, his character Crash starts. He's like, "Sorry, I can't do it because I'm with Nuke for the season," and they have a great scene right in the middle somewhere where they're in her apartment, or she comes to Crash's apartment, because Crash had told Nuke that, well, while we're on this winning streak, you got to respect the streak. So, you should abstain from sex. And so Annie gets mad because Nuke tells her this. So she goes storming over to Costner's house and starts telling him, blah, 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 you're meddling in my business, blah, blah, blah. And it crashed in a moment of, I don't know if it's just like he's throwing a dart in a sense. He tells her, he goes, "I want you." And she's like, "What?" He's like, "I want you." And she's like, and then they have this whole like real couple minute scene,
Mm-hmm.
and she's like, why? She tells him he's scared because she started to push up on him a little bit, and he kind of went, well, blah blah, and he says, well, maybe I am scared. And then she turns over the ironing board and is like, well, this is the damnedest year ever. The Durham Bulls can't lose, and I can't get laid. So again, the manipulation there, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
she's really putting it on, and it's just, I think at this point in the movie, you kind of feel like she does want Crash, but she's
Oh,
not
yeah.
going to be disloyal to Nuke. You know what I'm saying? But I mean, you start to feel
Yeah.
that. We're like, I mean, that's the whole purpose of her going over there to shout at him. Essentially, is to kind of, again, establish her as the dominant person here. But then it gets turned on her a little bit, and then she realizes, this isn't working, and that's what's happening. And so it's really, again, like I said, in terms of parts for women back then, you didn't see a lot. I mean, yes, women obviously were in movies, but I mean, in the terms of like this, a lot of women played the wife or the girlfriend, or, they weren't so dominant in terms of their part in the movie and how much they progressed the movie along and how integral they are to the story of this entire thing. Because like I said, she's really, and to me, that's the thing. To me, Susan Sarandon actually is the star of this film.
She
And,
is.
at this, you know what I mean? Like, so, and I don't remember, but if I remember correctly, on the movie poster, because I had the movie poster for years, Kevin's name is listed first because I think that's a lot of how the male is.
He definitely has top billing. Yeah.
Right. He's got top billing, and then Susan is next, and then it says Bull Durham, and then few other people are listed underneath that. But I think she should have been actually first because she really is the star of the film. But yeah, and as you get more into again what happens and how the dynamic shifts throughout this, because like you said, Nuke gets called up, so now and again Costner gets cut because he has served his purpose. He got Nuke to the big leagues, and now they don't really need him to be there because you give that spot to a younger guy who's trying. Again, you want to, promote somebody who's, because Crash had been in there. What they something like 20 some years, I guess they made it seem like he had been in the minors and he was chasing this home run record for minor league home runs in his, in a career. So that's a subplot. That's another subplot to the story, which there are many actually in this film. There's little things that are going on underneath,
little nuggets here and there.
Yeah,
and they do kind of manage to wrap them all up in a neat little. Because a lot of movies, you can almost tell it's almost become formulaic now in Hollywood. If there's something that's a plot point here that doesn't get resolved, they're leaving the door open to potentially have a sequel if the movie showing is great enough. But if it turns out to be a bomb, you just leave people going, "What happened to so and so?" And then there's a reboot 10 years later where they explain, they come up with some craptastic explanation of what happened. So they managed to wrap this up pretty neatly in a bow because you mentioned the home run record. Well, Crash leaves town, joins another minor league team, and manages to break the minor league record for career home runs.
Correct. But only Annie knows that he did it because he never told anyone.
Right.
Which is another one of those points. Yeah.
Yeah. And, so that all kind of gets wrapped up really neatly in a bow. And then, of course, this is making its way to the obvious conclusion that, Nuke is in the major leagues and doing big things, and Crash is retired, and he goes back to Durham and winds up linking back up with Annie. And Annie's like, I'm kind of done doing the groupie thing now. I just want to kind of settle in. So it all gets wrapped up in a neat little bow, but it was very well. Ron Shelton put this whole movie together very well, from the screenplay to the acting. And I mean, you want to talk about chops? I know we're talking about Bull Durham, and I mentioned some of Kevin Costner's later endeavors, but Susan Sarandon had a run there for a minute because she went from this. I think she was nominated for an Oscar in this movie. I could be wrong. Let me not misspeak. But she did. No, Dead Man Walking. That was in '95.
That was 95.
She was 95. She was nominated for an Oscar following before Bull Durham for Atlantic City in 1980, and then Thelma and Louise in '91. Then Lorenzo's Oil in '92, and The Client in '94. Like she just had a run. She just had a run. She was like, I'm taking over. She was like Juvenile. I'm taking over for the '88, the '91, and the '92, and the '94.
Yeah.
So I think they made the right choices in putting together this cast. Honestly, looking at it, I don't think anybody else would have been able, any other cast members would have been able to pull this off as masterfully as they did.
No, I 100% agree with you on that, sir. 100%. Like this movie was perfectly cast. Like I said, even the minor characters, the supporting ones, like I said, the Skip Trey Wilson is, his scenes are always great though. Every time he appears in the film, because he has this, what he does is he talks under his breath. He swears under his breath to himself every time he walks out of a scene, because it's like, that's his way of dealing with whatever is going on. Like again, he finds Nuke in the beginning, doing the girl in the locker room. He's like, it's your professional debut, and you're throwing it away for, some piece of ass. And and he walks out of the locker room. He's like, motherfucker, he's swearing under his breath. And like, there's a great scene. And I know you probably laughed at this too, Handy, because it just, he goes to Kevin Costner, the Skip, Trey Wilson, who plays Skip. He goes, I don't know what to do with these guys. I've tried to do it. And he goes, their kids scare them. And he's like, what? He's like, scare them. So Skip goes back into the locker room, throws a bunch of bats like Adam
Right.
is like, all right, guys,
Back to the
blah blah
locker
blah.
room.
Yeah, and he totally just rips him a new one. Blah 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 blah. And there's a great line. I know I keep saying that there's a great line, but to me this movie was so well written. There's so many great lines. He goes, he starts making fun of him. He's like, you throw the ball around the infield. You lollygag your way to first base. You lollygag. He goes, what does that make you, Larry? And the pitching coach jumps in, lollygaggers. And he's like, lollygaggers. And he walks off just, it's the greatest thing. Like I said, it's just so funny to see. And of course, Robert Wool, as the pitching coach, you just have to appreciate the man's timing is perfect. Everything he says in this film, I pretty much laughed at because every time he says something, it's just funny to me. Yeah. And I mean, yes, that's part writing, but he ad-libbed a lot as well because Robert Wall was a comedian, and this is what he did for a living.
He was a great stand-up comedian, and that actually, sir, that's an excellent segue into talking about the best scene. Nick and I have started this. I don't think we've done this before, and if we have, it's been a while, so forgive me. All right,
right, forgive us.
It's been a while, so forgive me. Cat Williams almost came out, but that's another movie that went in the 80s. That's Friday After Next, and we ain't gonna do that today. So
not today.
But we're good. We each went through and picked out a scene that we thought was, if not the best scene in the movie, overall, there was a great scene that just stood out for each of us. And so that's what we're going to talk about now is best scenes in the movie. And you know what, sir, I'm going to yield the floor to you.
Oh, okay.
Well, I'm going to yield the floor to you because this scene is probably the definitive moment in the movie where the pecking order was established in the trilogy of the main characters. But it had not set, the foundation had not been set yet because Annie had decided to go over here, and he's just like, hey, I'm getting with Stifler's mom.
Exactly.
And so tell us what scene you will be describing with us today.
All right, so and it's funny because this happens early in the movie. As I told you, we were explaining before, Annie gets the guys back to her house and starts kind of just asking them questions, letting them know how she does this, how she determines who she's going to be with, blah, 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 right? Uh-huh. So, Kevin Costner's Crash Davis is like, you know what, I've been in the minors for, I don't try out anymore, blah, blah, I'm not interested in anybody who's interested in that boy. He kind of gives her the brush off. And she asks him something, and he gave some other answer, and then she goes, well, what do you believe in? And this is one of the greatest speeches in cinema history in general. But this is his answer to, well, what do you believe in? And Crash turns around and tells her, well, I believe in the soul, the cock, the pussy, the small of a woman's back, the hanging curveball, high fiber, good scotch, that the novels of Susan Sontag are self-indulgent, overrated crap. I believe Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. I believe there ought to be a constitutional amendment outlawing AstroTurf and the designated hitter. I believe in the sweet spot, softcore pornography, opening your presents Christmas morning rather than Christmas Eve, and I believe in long, slow, deep, soft, wet kisses that last 3 days. And when you watch the scene, you see Susan Sarandon just hanging, and she's like, so do I, is her line. It's not always an audible line, but I had to look it up. I think she says "Oh my" or "So do I." It's one of the two. I've tried to nail it down a couple of times.
Based on the look on her face, my friend.
Yeah,
I'm leaning towards "Oh my."
Yeah, "Oh my." Yeah, I think it is "Oh my," but yeah. And then he just says "Good night," which is the greatest thing because he's just like, I've done what I set out to do. I gave you the big speech, and I'm out of here. Good night. It's so hilarious, and it really was. And it's again, it's just one of those things where like. And the part I found funny, and this is just a side note, one of those things like the fact that he mentions about Lee Harvey Oswald acting alone, because as we all know, 2 years later he ends up playing JFK in the JFK movie. So I just thought that's a funny callback. The funny callback to that was him saying, "I believe Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone." So yeah, so you gotta love that. But anyways. That's just one of my favorite scenes for the speech alone. There are obviously many in this movie, There's another quick one where they're sitting there, and Kevin Costner is giving Nuke the sign. He's like, "Here, throw this," and then Nuke is shaking him off. He's like, "No, I don't want to. I don't want to throw the curve. I want to give him the heat. Let me throw the heat." And Kevin Costner's like, "This guy's pitching, a shutout or whatever, and he's blowing me off." So he tells the guy, he's like, "Hey, there's a fastball coming, and when you think of me, speak kindly." So sure enough, Kevin Costner's like, "All right, serve it up." So the guy hits the ball and cranks it just out of the park. So obviously Kevin Costner goes to the mound with the new ball, and he's like, "Man, that guy did, that guy hit that ball so hard it should, it ran out here so fast it should have had a stewardess on it." He just starts ripping him the whole thing, and he goes, "Man, that sucker," Nuke tells him, "That sucker teed off on it like he thought he knew I was going to throw a fastball." And Kevin Costner goes, "He did know. I told him." That's just he's like, "That's the funniest thing." He's like, "He did know. I told him." Dude, I cried laughing when I heard that. And that's just as an example of just the relationship between these two. He never gives this kid a break with anything. He totally just, rides him as hard as he can throughout his time there. And it's just and it just shows you, though, like I said, the dynamic is so great that he's just like, "Hey, I'm preparing you for something. Like, I know why I'm doing this to you. You may not, but trust me when I tell you that I'm doing this for your benefit." Because he's trying everything to toughen this kid up, to get him to understand, hey, you don't blow off the catcher. If he calls a pitch, that's what you throw. Like, there's lessons throughout this entire film that I think could even be applied in real life, but I don't want to get too deep, into this conversation. This is a fun 80s movie podcast. I don't need to give you my Freudian take on the whole thing, but I just, again, there's a lot of things that you kind of can relate to and kind of be like, "Oh, I get that," or, "That's happened to me in a certain situation." So, but yeah, that's mine. Anthony, I know you have, your best scene. So go ahead. What is your best scene, sir?
Well, my scene takes place during a game, and for some reason, during the baseball game, the catcher and the manager will come out to talk to the pitcher, see, "Hey, how you feeling? What's going on? Blah blah blah. What are you seeing? I'm having trouble with my shoulder, blah, whatever the case may be." So this particular meeting, the entire damn team decides to come and gather, and like one by one, they all start gathering around the pitcher's mound. And everybody's got their own problem. Well, I got a hangnail. And one guy comes out and goes, "I can't catch the ball with anything. My girlfriend put a curse on my glove." And he's like, "Give me the damn thing. I'll take the curse off the glove." He's like, "You're going to have to kill a live rooster first." Like, there's all this stuff going on. And so, so Larry's like, what the hell's going on out here? And it's like, Nuke is scared because his eyelids are jammed and his old man's here. Is it a live rooster? He's like, "Well, we need a live rooster to take the curse off Jose's glove." Nobody seems to know what to get Millie or Jimmy for their wedding present. That about right? We're dealing with a lot of. And Larry goes, just out of nowhere, Larry just goes, "Okay, well, Candlesticks always make a nice gift, and maybe you can find out where she's registered, and maybe a place setting, or maybe a silverware pattern. Okay, let's get to it." Like, just like that, problem solved. I thought that was positively brilliant, and how nobody broke character when he did that.
Right?
Because I was dying watching that at home. Because Robert Wall never grew into as large a comic in the 80s as the Robin Williams and the Judy Tenutas and the Eddie Murphys and those folks. But I used to catch him on a Sunday night show called Stand-Up Comedy Sunday Nights on Fox.
Oh, yeah.
And he was brilliant. And matter of fact, this was not – and then he played the comic foil in the movie that I thought totally changed the trajectory of comic book genre movies. He was the reporter from the Gotham Times in the Batman.
Correct.
Michael Keaton and Kim Basinger. He's like, "Look at this guy's mirror. Maybe they should call him Bruce Wayne, huh?" Like he's always on. But I just thought that was absolutely amazing, because that's the kind of thing I could see happening on a minor league team at a minor league game. Yeah, all the guys are just—it's like, "Oh, break time. Let's just go talk." And there's always that one guy that has to be the voice of reason, and he just Candlesticks always make a nice gift. Definitely. And of course,
because he never gets to the heart of the problem. He just tells them that, and he goes, "All right, let's go," and then everybody goes back to their position. So he didn't really solve what they were all upset about. But it's just great that he got them to all go, "Okay, let's go," and everybody just goes back to their positions, and here we go.
And the funniest part about the second funniest part about that was they cut to Skip in the dugout, and it's like, what the hell's going on out there? He's like, like
yeah, right. And that's what he does. It's the greatest thing in the world. And Skip is just like, he just always. You gotta love it. You gotta love it.
Yeah. So I mean, that's you take all of these ingredients and you put them together. You take a guy that you can take and put in any role, and he's always going to be the same person in Kevin Costner. You take a very versatile actor and a guy like Tim Robbins. Now, Tim Robbins is known for doing a lot of comedy. He's done some dramatic stuff too. And then you take a home run hitter, no pun intended. You take an absolute home run hitter in a Susan Sarandon, or Sarandon, depending on how I'm thinking Saran-wrap.
Yeah. Oh, people, it's been pronounced differently. A lot of people have said Sarandon. Like they've called her both. Yeah, I've heard her called both.
You take a home run hitter like this woman who is tall, statuesque, beautiful, and a hell of an actress. Everybody laid into their roles 100% for this movie, I think. I mean, to me, it's a small wonder it wasn't nominated for more. I almost said Grammys. More Oscars.
More Oscars, right? Oscars.
More Oscars. I can see OG messaging me later. It's like, man, Grammys? Really? Come on, man. You got to do better. You got to do better. With the race. Shout out to our guy, the OG Sean Spencer. I'm going to send that to him. But it wasn't nominated for more Oscars than it was because it was an absolutely phenomenal film. So I agree. Do I dare say it's probably at the top of the list for me for baseball films?
I mean, like I said, I mentioned earlier, it is my favorite. For me, it's number one. And I know everybody, and the people I've told that to over the years, I've gotten, oh, well, what about The Natural? Field of Dreams, which is another Kevin Costner baseball film. What about it? And I'm like, no, I go, I'm not taking away from those movies at all. All great films. But for me, this is my favorite. Yeah, this one is my favorite. It just, because again, everything comes together. Like the writing is phenomenal. The acting is phenomenal. And again, as much as at the heart of it, it's about baseball, but it is a romantic comedy. I mean, you have the triangle here. That is the main story here. The triangle is there. But again, as I said, there's so many different things you could take from this film with the life lessons that, Crash is trying to teach Nuke, and how Annie's trying to teach him stuff as well. Move this young man along, give him more than,
Well, she was teaching him all right.
She gave him the education in a couple of ways, correct? But yeah, it's just, and then again, like you said, at the end of the film, Annie and Crash end up together though, and you're rooting for that the entire film because you just know it's going to happen. You're not sure how, if you're watching the movie for the first time, but you just know that somehow this is going to happen. And sure enough, and the thing is, even though you know it's going to happen, when it does, they do kind of throw you a swerve because at the end of the movie, because at first they do get together right after Nuke leaves. And you have the couple of scenes of them. They have a couple of days where all they do is stay in bed and do this and this and that. And Crash finds out about that other open position to go break the home run record. So he actually leaves her. He leaves a note to her in her house, blah, 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 finishing this, she understood. And that's the crazy part is that she accepted the fact of what he did. Even though they had a great few days, she understood that as a baseball player, this is what he needed to do. And so sure enough, when he's finished and comes back, she doesn't hold it against him. She doesn't give him a hard time. You know what I'm saying? They have like you said, they have the little talk about her not wanting to, she doesn't want to play anymore. She wants it to settle down. And, that's what he wants, obviously. And so you have this great moment of them, connecting and being together, which is what you wanted all along. And it's just, like I said, the movie ends great, as you mentioned, Handy. And I just think, like I said, throughout, it's a great baseball film, but it's actually probably a better love story in the end. If for you romantics out there, it's a great love story. And I, being one of them, I'm not going to lie, I'm a hopeless romantic. And I thought the love story in this was phenomenal. Yeah, so that's my take on that.
one of the things for me is that if you go back and watch that movie, they could have ended that movie any one of several different ways. It could have been
Oh, yeah.
her getting very serious about Nuke, and then
Yeah.
he leaves and walks away, or he comes back to get her. Things don't work out in the majors, and he comes back to get her. Or it could have been, how it was with him leaving and Kevin Costner breaking her heart because he gets picked up by the majors. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So it could have ended any one of several different ways. It was just that well written, and if they had decided to do it that way, it still would have been a good movie. It wasn't I mean, don't get me wrong. I've seen a lot of baseball movies like Angels in the Outfield, which
Yeah.
is going to have a predictable ending.
Yeah.
What's the movie with the kid that broke his arm and he all of a sudden could throw like
Yeah.
150
Rookie of the year.
Rookie of the Year. That one had a predictable ending. He was going to find some inspiration from somewhere. Like I knew 10 minutes into the movie, the first time I saw it, that his mom was the one that the baseball glove belonged to.
Right.
You know what I
No,
mean?
and I got a great side note for you about Rookie of the Year, and it's a little self-grandizing, but if you can find it, your boy Nick Rosario appears in the film for about 3 to 4 seconds.
Oh, word.
So yes, I filmed. They filmed at Wrigley Field, and I went, and I managed to get about 4 seconds on screen.
Okay.
I will give you this hint. It's in the final game, and I'm in. You could see me for 4 seconds in the lower left hand part of the screen in the film. So, like I said, I was what 20 at 19 at the time, so I look a little different. I'm much younger, but I assure you, it is me. And to give you a hint, I'm actually wearing a Chicago Bulls T-shirt in the scene. So that if
Okay.
that helps you to, if when you find it, I am the guy in the Chicago Bulls T-shirt in the lower left-hand side of the screen during the
All right.
final game of the movie. Yeah,
So now I'm going to look this up after the
sure.
show. After we're done taping,
Mhm.
I'm definitely going to look this up. I'll be like, I found you. There's your
All
mom.
right. So that no, yeah. So no. So yeah. But yeah, Rookie of the Year was another one. And again, like you said, a lot of those movies are kind of predictable. I mean, and they're supposed to be. They're little feel-good stories. The Cubs winning the World Series at that point, who hadn't won in 90 years at that point. So yeah, it's all those things. Like you said, Sandlot was kind of. I mean, Sandlot's another good baseball film. But it's kids playing baseball in the summer, so that
Right.
it's talked about that summer with so how a lot of these things are going to go. And again, this could have been, like you said, Anthony. Probably could. A lot of people would probably call it formulaic because they end up together in the end, but it's the way that they
So,
got there and the journey that they took to get there that I
yeah.
think is the story here. You know what I mean?
If you build a really good foundation in your screenplay, and you have really good actors to pull this off, actors and actresses to pull, you have a really good cast to pull this off. Um, you can write whatever ending you want, and they'll nail it. So any way that
Yeah.
whatever way that they decided to end this film, those three would have been able to pull that off and make it work, and it still would be
Oh yeah.
just as good a film. Although because of the way they built, I mean, they kind of had to end it that way. Not really, but they did build a lot of sexual tension between
Oh yeah.
Cratch and Annie. So yeah, but definitely, I am going to go ahead and make this statement. I'm going to put Bull Durham at the top of my favorite baseball movies, um, um, hands down. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That is Bull Durham. Now we're not going to leave you. We can't leave you without giving you some fun facts.
Right.
So
Fun facts.
Nick and I have compiled some fun facts about this movie. And sir, I'm gonna toss the first one across the plate to you, and let you
Okay.
go.
All right. So this is I found this very interesting because again, initially Kurt Russell had helped develop the script with Ron Shelton, and Kurt Russell was going to play the part of Crash Davis. But apparently, Russell had gone out of town for something, and while he was out of town, they saw a few more actors. Kevin Costner was one of them, and Ron Shelton was so taken with Costner that he offered him the role. So I thought that was an interesting one because it might have changed the dynamic a little bit. Everybody, I mean, I love Kurt Russell, to be honest with you, so I still might have enjoyed the film, but I don't think anybody could have played it as good as Kevin did. But just a fun fact, Kurt Russell, yeah.
I couldn't see Kurt being like, yeah, you know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
every role I've seen him in, he's been some. Except for, I mean, even in Tombstone, he was great
Yeah.
as Wyatt Earp. But of
Yeah.
course, your boy Val Kilmer stole the movie. So yeah, I think they went the right direction in going with Kevin Costner.
A side note here, just another sidebar, because I like these. That's my brain. I'm full of useless knowledge, so this will help you. Kevin Costner also played Wyatt Earp in his own movie. If you guys remember, he produced a Wyatt Earp movie where he played Wyatt Earp, and of course, we all know Kurt Russell in Tombstone played Wyatt Earp. So there you go. And Kevin Costner or Kurt Russell almost played Crash Davis. There's your symmetry, whatever you want to call it. So there you go. Just a fun fact for you guys as well.
Well, here's another art imitating art type deal. Here's my fun fact: the first choice to play Nuke Lelouch was Charlie Sheen, who wound up going on to play Wild Thing in the Major League movies, which may or may not show up in a show review at some point.
It might.
Maybe.
It may be. We'll think about it. We'll consider it. Right. We'll consider it.
But you mentioned you didn't know if anybody else had auditioned for the part or were considered for the part of Annie Savoy.
Yeah.
They looked at Kim Basinger and Ellen Barkin first, and they both passed the role up.
Oh, look at that.
I don't think Kim Basinger had the acting chops to pull it off.
I don't think it would have worked as well. I'll be honest. Yeah, I don't think I mean, again, not taking away from Kim, because for those of you who are movie buffs, she won the Oscar for L.A. Confidential. Very good in that film. Not an 80s film, though, so you won't see it on this show. But definitely liked L.A. Confidential. And, yeah, Kim Basinger proved that she could but I don't think she would have been right for this. Like you said, I think there's, different. And, again, Ellen Barkin would have had that, sexy kind of older woman thing, though, because Ellen Barkin, if you saw Ellen Barkin in the 80s, that's what she played. She was the femme fatale in everything she did. So, hats off to Ellen Barkin. I actually like Ellen Barkin, but I just don't see anybody but Susan Sarandon playing this part. So, yeah. But interesting choices that they looked at for this film.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. And let's see. This one made me chuckle.
Okay.
They brought in Paula Abdul to help her with some choreography for Tim Robbins. Right? And the only reason that she showed up to do it is because somehow or another she had in her head that she had a speaking part in the movie.
Yeah.
And then when they told her she didn't have a speaking part, she did the Paula Abdul thing and just kind of went off and
she left
the set.
Yeah.
Oh man,
that is a funny one. When I read that too, I went, really? Because it's just funny to think, because at that point Paula was only known for being a choreographer. She's doing the Janet Jackson Nasty video and all that stuff. Like, she hadn't quite. And again, if this movie would have been, came out in 88, it was probably filmed in 87. So that was right before Paula had hit, she was about a year and a half away from Straight Up. Right. Before she hopped on the music train.
She probably was more than likely in the process of recording her album.
Could have been, yeah. Could have been. Yeah, could have been.
Straight Up was still kind of banging when I went off to college in 88. Wait a minute. Didn't Bull Durham drop in 88?
Bull Durham dropped in 88, and I think Straight Up the album came out in 88, correct? The Paul Abdul album, I believe.
As a matter of fact, her album dropped 6 days after the release of Bull Durham.
There you go. So, yeah, 88, Paul Abdul dropped, and then, yeah, exactly. So, there you go. We're just uncovering all kind of stuff here, Handy. Look at it. You're not going to get this anywhere else, people. You're not going to get these facts anywhere else.
6 degrees of separation like a mofo, bro.
Right, exactly.
Like, I think Straight Up was the first song off the album. We'll come back to Bull Durham in a minute. It's the first song off the album. And okay, that makes sense, because I went off to school in September, so it was still a hot song. I'm thinking it came out like in 87 and it was still banging, which also had a tendency to happen. Like, I mean, dude, we were still bumping Thriller in 88, and Thriller dropped in 82. So
yeah, no kidding, exactly. Yeah, no, that's very true. But yeah, and here's another fun fact that I thought I had because again, we talked about the acting and this thing and everything, and it got one Academy Award nomination for Best Original Screenplay, which I thought was warranted, given as well as the movie was written. In my opinion, I thought, this is great, but it lost to Rain Man of all movies that year. And Rain Man, of course, also won Best Picture that year. So it's hard to argue with the
Oh,
Best Picture also winning the Best Original Screenplay because obviously the movie was well written and well acted as well. So yeah, I mean, again, and for edification, if you're wondering what the other three movies nominated for original screenplay that year were, they were Big, Fish Called Wanda, and a movie called Running on Empty with Judd Hirsch and River Phoenix. So those were the five nominated for original screenplay. But of course, Rain Man won that year, and Bull Durham did not. But again, writing is excellent in this movie. So
all,
yeah, but that's a
all,
little thing for you.
all excellent movies. And Fish Called
Their
Wanda,
own
if
right.
you haven't seen it, it's one of the absolute most hilarious comedies. Hilarious comedies with a crossover cast because two or three of the cast members were also from Monty Python's Flying Circus. As a matter of fact, John Cleese was lead, and Terry Palin was in it.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, not to get off the beaten path,
No,
but
yeah, but
that's what we do. It's just like I said, we just follow these little threads.
Yeah.
If you guys have ever watched our football show and wonder how it is that we wind up wandering off, is because there are 8 million. Think of the meme with the guy with all the strings, and he's trying to prove this. He's trying to prove this conspiracy theory. That's how our brains all work. So here's my next fun fact. When they wanted to film they wanted to film up the stadium with extras. So what they did was they went to a Pink Floyd concert.
Yeah.
And they brought a bunch of people from the Pink Floyd concert to come to the ballpark and be extras in the stands. So if you ever watch the game and you're wondering why the people in the stands look like they might not understand what's going on, I will say again, if you did not hear me, they just came from a Pink Floyd concert.
They did cover exactly. Yeah, that's a fun fact for sure because you're thinking where in a Pink Floyd concert in the Carolinas and the thing is this movie they said was filmed pretty much later on. I think it was filmed more in like September, October-ish. So it was a little colder down there in the Carolinas than it would have been during the summertime.
Right.
Because there's one point they mentioned, if you see it, when Kevin Costner's on the mount talking to Nuke, you can see his breath.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody had mentioned that, like, why do you see his breath? Well, that's why. They were filming in the colder months, as it was starting to get colder more into the fall and towards, the winter in October. So that's why you see some breath of Kevin Costner on the mound. You can actually see the breath. And that is why, because the movie was obviously filmed after the minor league baseball season had finished. So then you have the use of the stadium, yada, 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 that sort of thing. So, yeah, that's another just small, interesting tidbit. Again, we mentioned, the meeting at the pitcher's mound, that was ad-libbed by Robert Wall because that was just his comedic mind. And yeah, and it is still funny because, again, I think it's just funny that he didn't really say anything to the problems they had, just told them what they should try to get for Millie and Jimmy's wedding, and then just walked off and went, okay, let's go. He just walks back to the dugout. That's how you do it.
Wrap them up, call it a day, bro. All right, let's get to.
Right, exactly. That's exactly what they did. But yeah, so other than that, I think we had you and I had a couple of the same facts. Like I said, we mentioned that the movie was loosely based on director Ron Shelton's own experience in the minor leagues, which again I thought added a great authenticity to this film, and I think that's why it's so well written and it's so well played. But yeah, it's for me, and I guess just we're probably getting to the end here, Mr. Handy. My summation is simply this: like, if you're just looking for a good baseball romantic comedy, and I know some of you are, definitely check out Bull Durham, 1988. Running time of 1 hour and 48 minutes. Again, you're going to get everything in this film. You get the action with the sports, you get your love story, you get the comedy, it's just one of those films where you get everything, your emotions. If you get invested in this movie, you can really get emotional about some of the things that happen in there. So I think the movie is great for all that. Again, it is my favorite baseball movie. I give it 4 out of 4 stars. If you haven't seen it, find it on a streaming service, buy the DVD, whatever, but definitely check out Bull Durham.
Definitely. A 10. I give it a 10. It actually is. It's a great movie. I mean, it handles all the elements of a sports movie, from the locker room chemistry on off field to the chemistry on field to some of the zaniness that you see in them. I mean, I've been to a minor league game or two, and I've seen where there's 5 people at the pitcher's mound, You know, that kind of thing, and some of the zaniness that goes on, you know, between the innings switching over and all of that good stuff. And yes, they're groupies at the minor league games too.
Oh yeah,
There's
100%.
the team the Nationals have a locally based farm team called the Potomac Nationals, and boy,
Okay.
those ladies be on full force.
Right. Well, yeah.
There's a baseball / softball complex out there where my brother and I used to go play softball. Sometimes we go
Oh,
and I
there you
just
go.
sit, I go, Brad, all of them for. He's like, oh man, that's them girls. Oh, them girls.
Yeah.
Yeah, them girls. I
Right.
was like, oh,
Shit.
like that's like 8 of them. Are any of them
Yeah.
making any money? He's like, supposed to be some kid that might go up to Minnesota or something like that. I mean, literally,
Right.
that's
Exactly.
you know,
Yeah.
that's the conversation we have. So if you want all of that and the stuff that goes on behind the scenes, because you ever wonder what do these guys do when they're not playing ball? You know,
Right.
it gives you a little bit of all of that, and it's I like I said, it's absolutely phenomenal, well written, well filmed, and the acting is superb. I'm gonna give it a chef's kiss. So definitely worth that hour and 48 minutes. I know that might seem a little long, but definitely worth the hour and 48 minutes. Check out Bull Durham today. And I think with that, sir, that pretty much wraps up this week's episode of Popcorn and Parachute Pants. You got anything you
Yes.
want to share for the people, for the good of the crowd, for the good of the you got anything you want to share with the people for the good of the crowd before we get out of here today? Y'all
Yes.
didn't know it was an amateur DJ with no turntable.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Just we're back. You know, thank you for watching this episode, and we hope that you'll check out our next episode. But yes, definitely glad to be back, Handy, doing this. I'm a 80s movies nut, as are you.
All day.
So there's nothing else I'd rather be doing right now.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I agree. Except maybe if I had a whole like stacks of money behind me. Well,
Well, yeah.
I don't want to have stacks of money behind me. I'd have them off camera. If I had stacks of money, they'd be stacked like just at my feet, and I could just pet the money and go, "Yes, baby, that's good. We're gonna take you to we going to Dubai next week. Yes, we're gonna find you
That's
all the
right.
loans." So,
Yeah, exactly.
thank you. I'm talking to imaginary money. Can y'all tell? It's that time of the day. We appreciate you guys tuning in to this week's episode of Popcorn and Parachute Pants. On behalf of my colleague, Nick Rosario, I am Mr. Fingers. Y'all stay tuned. Next week, we will be back. We will see you soon. Take care.